They laughed. At my own promotion dinner, my parents raised their glasses and said, "Well, at least Lauren's always been stable." That was their word for me. Not brilliant, not bold, just reliable. But I didn't cry. I reached into my purse, pulled out a bank statement, and slid it across the table. That's $180,300. 9 years of mortgage payments. Every single month. Quietly. Without a thank you. "Hi, I'm Lauren, the good daughter. The one who never asked for credit until that night." You want to know what happened next? You should, because everything changed. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now let's start the story together. No one really announces it, not even in your own head. You just sort of wake up one morning and realize you've been playing the supporting role in a story you thought was yours. I was 23 when it clicked. The heat in Austin that August was thick, stubborn, the kind that clung to your skin even after the sun had dipped. I had just gotten my first full-time job in corporate finance, and for the first time in my life, a paycheck that felt like a breath of air after years of academic pressure and unpaid internships. I could have spent it on something exciting, a trip, a coat, maybe a nicer coffee maker. But instead, I logged into my bank account and set up a $400 monthly mortgage payment to my parents' account. They never asked, but I knew they were paying it down slowly, and Andrew's tuition was expensive. Mom once told me that good daughters don't wait to be needed, they anticipate. So I did. The payment went through quietly. No phone call, no text, not even a comment at the dinner table. A week later, we hosted a backyard barbecue to celebrate Andrew's internship with some trendy tech startup in New York. Family, neighbors, people I hadn't seen since high school all gathered under the swaying string lights. The grill smoked beside Dad while he half listened to a cousin's story, nodding like he was somewhere else entirely. I walked around holding a paper plate of potato salad and watermelon slices, making small talk and smiling on cue. Mom clinked her glass halfway through the evening, the universal signal that she was about to make an announcement. "We're so proud of Andrew," she said, her voice bright with rehearsed joy. "He's headed to the big city. Tech firms are hard to break into, but he did it." Applause followed, and I clapped too, though a little slower. A few eyes glanced at me, as if wondering what I'd been up to. I cleared my throat. "Actually, I just got promoted," I offered. "Project lead. It happened last Friday." Mom didn't miss a beat. "That's nice, sweetie. Can you help Andrew with finding a place? Rent in Manhattan's no joke." She moved on before I could respond. Someone else handed her a bowl of corn salad. The conversation shifted. The attention, like usual, had a gravitational pull, and it was always toward Andrew. Maya was standing beside the folding table watching the whole thing play out with a quiet frown. She nudged my elbow. "You good?" she asked under her breath. I smiled. "Of course." I was always good. That was my thing. Later that evening, I slipped inside to refill the ice bucket and overheard my mom talking to Aunt Meredith in the kitchen. "Andrew's really the one going places," she said, voice lowered but not enough. "Lauren's stable, solid, but she doesn't aim big, you know." I stood in the hallway, invisible, ice bucket in hand, sweat trickling down my back. I didn't move. I don't think I even blinked. I just let the words wrap around me like a damp cloth, discomforting but familiar. When the night wound down, I waved goodbye, stacked chairs, gathered trash, and pretended not to hear the parting jokes about Andrew needing a full-time assistant in the Big Apple. I laughed at one. I don't know why. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat cross-legged on the floor. I pulled my laptop toward me and reopened my banking app. My name flashed in the corner, Lauren Chen. No middle name, no title, no tagline, just me. I scheduled the next $400 mortgage payment. No one had asked me to. No one had thanked me. But I did it anyway. Some people keep photo albums. I kept receipts. Not the kind you crumple into your purse and forget, but digital ones. Monthly PDFs that quietly confirmed I was holding up a part of the sky my parents never acknowledged. It started simple enough. 1 payment became 2, 2 became 6. Then a year passed, then 3. Promotions came in, sometimes small bumps, other times more significant. I started with a 1-bedroom apartment and eventually moved into a place with windows that actually caught the light. My wardrobe shifted too. Sleeker cuts, nicer shoes, a tote bag with a zipper that didn't stick. I even started getting nods from directors during Monday meetings, but at home, nothing shifted. "You're so responsible," Mom said once during a call that lasted under 4 minutes. "It's nice to have at least one child we don't need to worry about." I knew she meant it as a compliment, but it always sounded like a sentence to me. I never told them about the raises, or the bonuses, or the long hours I spent double-checking spreadsheets so someone else could take the credit. But the mortgage checks? Those arrived on time, every month, without fail. At Thanksgiving in 2018, while passing a dish of green beans to Uncle Theo, I overheard my mom say, "We've almost paid off the house. Richard's been really diligent with the finances." She smiled as if it were a point of pride. I stood there with a mouthful of lukewarm stuffing, unsure whether to laugh or leave. I chose to chew in silence. Maya was the only one who knew. She noticed the way I tracked my finances like a religion, even when we were out grabbing coffee. One Saturday afternoon, we sat in a sunlit corner of a bookstore cafe, both sipping oversweet iced lattes. I had just opened my laptop to double-check something on my budgeting spreadsheet when she tilted her head. "Do they even know you're doing this?" she asked softly. I shrugged. They never asked. In the fall of 2020, Andrew left a voicemail. "Hey," his voice crackled, casual as ever. "I'm looking to buy a laptop for work, like a decent one. Can you help me out? Mom said maybe you'd have a little extra this month." I didn't return the call. Instead, I texted Mom. "He should buy what he can afford." Her reply came fast. "He's under a lot of pressure. You know how hard the job market is for his generation." I typed and deleted 10 different versions of my response. In the end, I didn't send anything at all. That winter, Austin got one of its rare freezes. Temperatures dropped enough that my windows fogged up and stayed that way. On a particularly sharp afternoon, I sat at my desk, fingers stiff from the cold because the heater in my apartment didn't reach that far. Still, I clicked through the steps. Log in, select account, transfer funds. The number hadn't changed, still $400, but it felt heavier. The transaction beeped confirmation. Sometimes the weight isn't in the dollar amount. It's in the silence that follows. In early 2021, I learned through a family group text that Andrew had defaulted on a car loan. He'd used Dad's name. The messages were vague. Some issues with credit, until Maya, who happened to work in financial compliance, pulled the report for me. It was bad. Missed payments, accumulated interest, and a repossession notice that had nearly gone through. When I brought it up to Mom during a weekend call, she was matter of fact. "He's under pressure," she repeated. "It's different for boys. There's more to prove." I wanted to ask her what exactly Andrew had been trying to prove by skipping payments on a car he couldn't afford, but I bit my tongue. Again. Instead, I opened my receipts folder and added the call to a mental tally. A few months later, I was promoted to Director of Financial Strategy. My boss called me into a glass-walled conference room and said, "You're sharp. Calm. You see things before they happen. We need that." I shook his hand, smiled, and said all the right things. That night, I called Mom thinking, maybe foolishly, that this would be different. "Director," she repeated, "that's good, just don't let it get to your head, okay?" I stared out my living room window, the one that finally let in decent light, and nodded even though she couldn't see me. "I won't," I said. But inside, something dimmed, not out of rage, not even disappointment. It was more like understanding. There's a point where silence isn't a lack of sound. It's a learned language. and I was fluent. It was supposed to be a quiet celebration, a toast, a meal, a simple night. That's what I thought. We'd booked the private room at Cento Osteria, tucked away in downtown Austin, the kind of place with napkins folded like origami and servers who glided instead of walked. The soft hum of piano music drifted in from the main dining room, and the lighting made everyone look kinder than they really were. I had chosen this place carefully, not too fancy to be showy, not too casual to be dismissed, just enough ceremony to mark the moment, my official promotion to Director of Financial Strategy. People arrived slowly. Maya first in a navy jumpsuit and low heels, carrying a card with gold lettering. My colleagues trickled in next, faces I saw every weekday but who, tonight, brought spouses and inside jokes. Then came my parents, Mom in her signature teal blouse perfectly ironed, Dad silent in a blazer he probably hadn't worn since a wedding 3 years ago. Dinner began warmly. My boss, a man named Eric with a genuine voice, raised his glass. To Lauren, she's been our anchor. Calm in every storm, sharp when it counts. We're lucky to have her. There was a light applause. I smiled, polite. My mother leaned toward my father and whispered, "Director, huh?" Not VP. I heard it. She didn't mean for me to, or maybe she did. Appetizers arrived. Burrata with heirloom tomatoes, grilled artichokes, a basket of warm focaccia. I passed the bread, made small talk with my cousin Nate about his new dog, and tried to ignore the pressure building behind my ribs. Then Mom stood. She held her wine glass delicately like it was part of the performance. "To Lauren," she began, pausing just enough to seem reflective, "who has always been stable, reliable. That counts for something, right?" A few chuckles floated around the table, uncertain, uncomfortable. Maya dropped her fork. The sound felt louder than it should have. I glanced at her. She didn't say a word, but her jaw was tight. I didn't respond either, not with words. Instead, I reached down, unzipped the side pocket of my handbag, and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. The weight of it wasn't much, but in my hand it felt heavier than anything I'd carried. I also pulled out a pen, silver, slim, engraved with 3 small words. "Don't shrink yourself." I had it made last year after Maya said those very words to me in the parking lot of our favorite cafe. My voice was calm, even. But it was the kind of calm that only comes when something inside you has stopped asking for permission. I slid the paper across the table, placing it gently in front of my mother. She looked down. Her face didn't change right away. "That's a summary of every mortgage payment I've made on your house over the last 9 years, I said. $180,300, give or take. Someone at the far end of the table set down their glass with a soft clink. I continued, "Maybe not special." But it wasn't nothing. Mom didn't speak. Her face had gone pale. Dad shifted in his chair, eyes suddenly fascinated by the candle in the center of the table. Neither of them looked at me. The silence wasn't shocked. It was stifled. It had shape. Weight. I didn't wait for a response. I stood slowly, tucking the pen back into my bag. "I paid for the dinner, too," I said, my tone still steady. "And just so we're clear, that's the last check I'll ever write for this family." Then I walked out. I didn't rush. I didn't slam the door. I just moved through the restaurant, past strangers enjoying wine and laughter, and stepped into the cool spring night. The air smelled like rosemary and exhaust. Somewhere behind me, a chair scraped the floor, but I didn't turn around. Outside, I took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. Austin's light pollution made it hard to see stars, but that night, I didn't need any. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I thought I'd walk out of that restaurant feeling strong. Instead, I walked out feeling hollow. There was no music in the parking lot, no wind, just the dull click of my own heels and the faint echo of a city that didn't care what happened in a private dining room. When I got home, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was sterile. My apartment, Usually a comforting blend of soft lamplight and gentle clutter. Felt like a hotel room someone had checked out of. I set my bag down and stood in the dark for a few minutes, not turning on any lights. Then my phone buzzed. And again. Then it didn't stop. The first was from Mom. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone. How could you? No punctuation, no greeting. Just that." I didn't reply. Another one came in an hour later. This time it was an email. The subject line read, "What you're walking away from." Attached was a collage of old family photos, me holding Andrew as a baby, a grainy shot from a school play, a Christmas morning when I was 10, blinking under the weight of a too big sweater. I looked at each photo, not with nostalgia, more like I was examining someone else's memories. I closed the email without responding. Maya came over that night, holding a bag of Chinese takeout and a bottle of cheap wine. She didn't ask questions, just unpacked the food and kicked off her shoes like it was any other Friday. We ate on the floor, legs crossed. She poured the wine into mismatched mugs. "You want to talk about it?" she asked. I stared at the window, the city lights smudged like watercolor. "I'm not angry," I said finally, "just tired." Maya nodded. "That makes sense." Later, she fell asleep on my couch, half covered in a blanket I never remembered buying. Her presence was quiet but solid, the kind that doesn't demand space but offers it. The next morning, there was a voicemail from Andrew. "Look," his voice said, casual and dismissive, "no one told you to pay the mortgage, okay? You did that, but thanks, I guess. Drama much?" I deleted the message before it ended. By Monday, I was back at work. Everything looked the same. Same gray cubicle walls, same smell of burnt coffee, same printers coughing out spreadsheets. But something had shifted inside me. People asked how the dinner went. I smiled. It was clarifying. That was all I said. On my lunch break, I opened my laptop and pulled up my email. Mom's message was still sitting there, unread but screaming in its subject line. I clicked it open again, scrolled past the collage, and hit reply. I typed only one line. "I'm not walking away from family. I'm walking away from debt, emotional and otherwise." Then I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. That night, I went through my contacts. First was Mom, then Dad, then Andrew. One by one, I hit block. There were no fireworks, no thunderous feeling of closure, just a soft, definitive silence. And strangely, it didn't scare me. It soothed me. $180,000 might be what I paid in dollars, but it's not even close to what it cost me. Late spring in Austin had its own kind of optimism. Longer days, soft evening breezes, the city humming with early festival crowds, and patio dinners. I had been invited to speak at a women's finance panel hosted in a mid-sized auditorium on the east side. Nothing flashy, but earnest. Real. Maya helped me pick the outfit. Structured navy blazer, subtle gold earrings, low heels that wouldn't catch on the rug. I wasn't nervous, not really, just aware of the way I took up space now, of how I stood straighter without realizing it. The panel was called Money and Meaning, Reclaiming the Invisible Labor. I sat beside 3 other women, an HR executive, a single mom turned entrepreneur, and a small business accountant. When it was my turn to speak, I adjusted the microphone, took a sip of water, and began. "I'm not here to talk about debt in numbers. I'm here to talk about the kind you don't track, because you're not supposed to mention it." I paused. Let it land. I come from a family where helping quietly was the default. I paid off things no one asked me to. Mortgage payments, mistakes, gaps. I filled in all the blanks without anyone noticing the pen in my hand. I didn't do it for applause, but I also didn't expect that doing it would make me invisible. The room held its breath. "We carry things," I said softly, without asking, because someone has to. But just because it's silent doesn't mean it doesn't leave a mark. When I stepped down, the applause wasn't loud, but it was steady. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes. Another mouthed, "Thank you," as I passed. That night, after dinner with Maya, I sat alone in my apartment. The window was open. The sounds of the city filtered in, cars, distant laughter, the metallic whine of a bike chain being locked below. I pulled out a blank journal I had bought on impulse the month before. The cover was navy, like my blazer, embossed in small silver letters. 9 years. I opened to the first page and began to write. Things I paid for that you'll never see on a bank statement. Babysitting Andrew so Mom could take naps on Sundays. Staying quiet when he crashed Dad's car senior year and said nothing. Filing their late taxes without a word twice. Pretending to be fine so they could focus on him. Apologizing first, even when I was hurt. The list went on. Line after line. Some things I hadn't thought about in years, but they surfaced now like old receipts folded into coat pockets. When I looked up, it was past midnight. I closed the journal gently, like sealing a box I didn't need to open every day but still needed to keep. Maya texted me a photo, a cobblestone street in Florence she'd saved from Pinterest. Caption, fall trip. Real one this time? I smiled, then typed back, maybe. It's time I travel for something other than guilt. Before going to bed, I opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. There they were. 3 active recurring transfers, mortgage, utilities, property tax, all labeled under familiar shorthand, Chen Home. I hovered over each one, not rushed, not angry. Click, cancel, click, confirm, click, done. No fireworks, no sting, just silence, again. But this time, it wasn't empty. I walked over to the bathroom, washed my face, and reached for a yellow sticky note from the drawer. On it, I wrote 6 words. You can't heal in the same place you were erased. I pressed it to the corner of the mirror. Then I looked at my reflection and nodded. Not approval, not pity, just recognition. Freedom wasn't loud. It was sipping black coffee in a quiet town and not checking my phone. Astoria greeted me with mist and seagulls. The kind of town where the ocean is always near, even when you can't see it. Its presence more felt than heard. I had rented a small room above a bookstore, the kind with a crooked staircase and a window that stuck halfway open. Each morning I walked without destination, past boats swaying in the marina, past benches with chipped paint, past dogs napping under cafe tables. No one knew me. No one expected anything. That, I realized, was its own kind of luxury. I didn't bring work, just a notebook, a camera, and a pair of walking shoes that finally got proper use. I slept in without apology. I ordered pancakes and ate every bite. I watched the clouds roll in from the coast and didn't try to outpace them. One afternoon, I found myself in a small cafe with fogged-up windows and soft jazz on the speakers. The place was half full. I had just sat down with a black coffee when an older woman, maybe late 60s, politely asked if she could share my table. Her tray held tea and a lemon scone. We didn't talk at first, just nodded at the weather, the music, the rhythm of town life. Eventually, she looked up and said, I spent 20 years trying to earn my parents' love. One day, I stopped. Best decision I ever made. She didn't offer her name. I didn't ask, but I wrote her words down on a napkin and tucked it into my journal. That evening, I stopped by a souvenir shop near the waterfront. I bought a single postcard, blue with an image of the Oregon coastline. On the back, I wrote, Finally home. L. I addressed it to myself and dropped it in a blue mailbox by the dock. Later that night, I had a video call with Maya. She tilted the camera to show her cat trying to climb into the laundry basket. We didn't talk about family. We didn't have to. How's it feel? She asked, sipping something warm. Quiet, I said, but in a good way. The next morning, I opened my journal one last time, pages filled with scribbled thoughts, quotes, grocery lists, and silent reckonings. On the last page, I wrote, I'm not angry anymore. Just done. Then I closed the book. As the train pulled out of the station that afternoon, I leaned my head against the window and watched the coastline drift by. Gray waves, jagged rocks, a lone figure walking a dog near the edge of the surf. They'll tell their version. I'll live mine. I used to think freedom would feel like fireworks, but it turns out it feels more like watching the ocean alone and not needing to explain why. Sometimes we give too much to be seen by people who never learned how to look at us with care. But peace isn't about staying quiet to keep others comfortable. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to shrink. Love without respect is not love, it's debt. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to share your own thoughts. Maybe someone out there needs to know they're not alone in choosing peace over obligation.